All right, so picking back up, chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. There's a echo coming from someone. I'm not sure who. Okay. So before we begin, continuing on with chapter 2, text 14, wanted to just see if there are any reflections or comments, or for those who were not here last week, if you got the opportunity to hear the recording, if there's anything that came up for you that you'd like to bring up, we're happy to hear that right now. Okay. Everyone's satisfied? All right. I'll recite the invocation mantras. You can um, follow along with me. Then the introduction, the first two mantras, and the last three. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So last week we covered two verses, text 12 and text 13. We're just at the on-ramp of Krishna's instructions to Arjuna after he ceremoniously and with humility requested Krishna for some guidance. Recognizing his confused state of mind, he called himself a miserly state of mind. And he's asking Krishna, please give me that direction that will give me long-term benefit. He's a very wise person uh, for two reasons. One is, A, he approached the right person to seek guidance from. First of all, he's seeking guidance. He's approaching the right person to seek guidance, and he's asking the right question. I want long-term benefit. Often we get stuck with short-term issues that we're dealing with that we wish to seek guidance for. Yet Arjuna is a more strategic thinker, a more long-term thinker. So then Krishna smiles and starts to give him the sauce, as it said. He chastises him. You think you're speaking learned words, but in reality, not at all learned. Because those who are wise don't lament for the living or the dead. So last week was Krishna explaining a little bit more about why people don't lament about the living or the dead is because of understanding the distinction between matter and spirit. And Krishna makes a very important point first in text 12 that we're all individuals. We have an individual in the past, we have individuality in the past, we have individuality now, and we will continue to have individuality in the future. Never does individuality ever merge into a supreme consciousness. That individuality always remains, just as for the kings on the battlefield as well as for Krishna himself. So, in the very first instruction that Krishna gives, he's debunking the 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 philosophy that's very proliferated the entire universe or the entire world anyway about how everything is one, that we don't have an individual existence, also known as Advaitavad or Mayavad philosophy. In the very first verse of Krishna's instruction, he debunks that philosophy. Anyway. And then Krishna says in text 13, just as a person moves from boyhood to youth to middle age to old age, similarly, the soul will pass on to the next body after birth. Simple kind of metaphor and understanding, analogy to understand this fundamental concept that we're not the body. So now Text 14 and text 15 is what's the application? Very quickly, Krishna gets to application. It's not good enough to just know philosophy. It's not good enough just to know theory. We've got to enter into the laboratory of life and apply it. So text 14 and 15 is okay, how do you apply this? In chemistry class in school, we spend a lot of time learning the theories about this molecule attached to that molecule in organic chemistry or regular chemistry. And then finally, at the end of the class, you finally get to go to the lab and mix those fluids together and see the effervescence and the beautiful smoke coming out. And you're like, yeah, look at that magic. But here in Bhagavad Gita, very quickly, Krishna gets to application. Go to the lab of life and apply. What's the application? Text 14. Here we go. All right. Let's see. Vrinda, would you like to read text 14?
I can go ahead. Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Matra sparshastु kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukkada agama payino nityas tam titikshava bharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharatha, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. In the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. According to Vedic injunction, one has to take his bath early in the morning, even during the month of Magha, January and February. It is very cold at that time, but in spite of that, a man who abides by the religious principles does not hesitate to take his bath. Similarly, a woman does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the months of May and June, the hottest parts of the summer season. One has to execute his duty in spite of climatic inconveniences. Similarly, to fight is the religious principle of the Kshatriyas, and although one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. One has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge, because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya, illusion. The two different names of address given to Arjuna are also significant. To address him as Kaunteya signifies his great blood relations from his mother's side, and to address him as Bharata signifies his greatness from his father's side. From both sides, he is supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the matter of proper discharge of duties. Therefore, he cannot avoid fighting.
Thank you. So, what would you say is the application that Krishna gets to right at the outset here? Vrinda.
I think, in my perspective, it seems like he's trying to connect it to us like normal people in our regular day-to-day or day-to-day lifestyles. Like he said that for men or for anyone, you still take a bath even in the cold months, and then women, even though it's inconvenient and it's a struggle and it might not be convenient to do it, you still have to cook in the hot months too. And he's trying to connect that to Arjuna by saying that even though you don't want to do it, you still have to
Mm,
because that's your duty, I
mm,
think.
yeah,
Yeah, no matter what, you have to perform your duties.
yeah. And inbuilt in that is this very important message of titikshava, which is the Sanskrit. Titikshava is to tolerate. Often, especially in relational issues, we think of tolerate as tolerating another person. What do you think Krishna is telling Arjuna to tolerate here? Like, what specifically is he asking Arjuna to tolerate?
Perhaps discomfort.
Yes. Discomfort. Okay. That's one way to look at it. Yeah.
That's coming from his duty
Yes.
and the non-permanence of happiness.
Yeah. The non-permanence of happiness and distress, not just happiness, right? And their
Mhm.
disappearance are like the appearance and disappearance of the winter and summer season. They arise, the sense of happiness and the sense of distress arise from what? Matra sparsha or sense perception. Sense perception means the senses contact the sense object, and then the mind associates happiness or distress to it, and then it fizzles away into a different feeling of happiness or distress based on the next set of sense perception that one experiences. Yes? So you see a nice, dark, beautiful chocolate cake, and you're like, I want that chocolate cake. There's a sense of anticipation and maybe even a joy of seeing chocolate cake. And the next thing you know is you see that enemy that you hate eating that chocolate cake, and you don't get to eat it. And then you're feeling this distress and pain in your heart. Say, very similar images, but first the matra sparsha, the sight, um, invites a sense of happiness and joy. In the next scene, the same matra sparsha, the sight coming in touch with the scene, you become distressful. And Krishna is saying it's all coming from sense perception. So then the question is, what is he asking Arjuna to tolerate? And, you know, one is that he's telling Arjuna to tolerate the distress. Actually, he's telling Arjuna to tolerate the mind. This is foundational for the spiritualist. For a progressive person on the path of spirituality, it is so important to understand how the subtleties of the mind work and to recognize that this mind is not something I place faith in or hopes for happiness in in identifying with the mind. So the spiritualist knows how to distance themselves from the mind and just watch the movie. Have some popcorn and just watch your mind. I had a student once in Washington University where we used to go to share Bhagavad Gita and Bhakti Yoga in general. Gosh, this might be over 10 years ago. I remember she said she had this epiphany after we did a meditation session. She said, "Oh my God, I had this realization. I'm not my mind." And for 4 years after that, because she kept coming, she became like the president of the student club and all of that. And when she was graduating, she said, that's the most important lesson I've learned. I am not my mind. It's amazing. It's super liberating. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, tolerate your mind. That's going to make a big deal of one circumstance and then the next circumstance. Happiness and distress. It's just like summer's going to come, winter's going to come. You can't stop it. It's just going to come. All right. Other comments or thoughts?
I have a question, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
You look resigned to the fact that you have a question. Almost sad that you have a question. Why?
I'm
You should
very
be happy you
tired.
have a question.
I'm very tired today. Busy.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, so this particular thing, tolerance, I've been contemplating about this in the past few days, and I realized that how difficult it is to tolerate. It's not easy. And definitely like spirituality, spiritual practices, chanting the holy name helps us, or basically it gives us an ability to tolerate. but still I'm not satisfied. Meaning, how do we like properly cultivate this quality of tolerance? I heard this I heard this statement from you only once. You said that the real test of our bhakti or advancement is done when there are provoking situations. How we react to those situations,
Mm.
that is the real test of our advancement or bhakti. And I see practically in myself, I have zero tolerance, to be honest. So, how do we cultivate, if you can give some practical tips, this quality of tolerance?
Practical tips to cultivate tolerance.
Of course, like from the perspective of,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So this is a whole conversation, right? Obviously. Number one to start with is to be able to recognize or be self-aware, to recognize the emotions that come up for me, whatever they may be, the joy, the excitement, the frustrations, the anger, the irritations, the pet peeves. To recognize those emotions, give it a name, and then the self-awareness is to understand behind those emotions, what are my, you could say, in the language of nonviolent communication, what are my needs behind that? Or if you want to use the language of Vedic texts, what are my attachments that are tugging on? So I have certain attachments that are getting tugged in this particular circumstance that's causing this emotion of whatever, frustration, anxiety, sadness. So behind the emotions is an attachment, to recognize those attachments. So, in that self awareness, as we recognize our attachments, what tends to happen is humility increases because we recognize the degree of impurity or the degree of contamination that the material disease that we have currently. Our hearts are very materially attached. So, if we don't have the solid foundation of Krishna consciousness or a developing relationship with Krishna and let's say representatives of Krishna, if that relationship and that sense of shelter and security in those relationships are not there, then that humility can degrade into a whirlpool of sadness and self-loathe or depression, self-hate. Yet, if there's a secure foundation of relationship with Krishna, and we know we're loved despite our weaknesses, then we can progress on that humility instead of degrading into um, self-deprecation, r- elevates one to tolerance, self-acceptance, and tolerance. The more we tolerate ourselves, the more we can tolerate others. A practical exercise to do is to take notes of our own attachments and journal about our attachments, and also simultaneously cultivate. So that's recognizing the negative, but simultaneously cultivate this sense of security and shelter in Krishna. Combine the two together. And that second part, the very practical thing to do is, take shelter of Krishna's holy name through the chanting process. And so that chanting process gives us a solid foundation of self-acceptance and security and affection. We feel love even though we're not worthy of it. That gives us a strength for tolerance. And if you hang out with people who are very tolerant, you'll become more tolerant just by osmosis. Osmosis, however you say it. Yeah. Is that okay?
Yes. So you
I,
said,
I and Yeah, and I invite anybody else who would like to chime in and offer some thoughts on this cultivation of tolerance. It's a nice topic. Yeah. Go ahead. You want to say something, Kapil?
Yeah, I was just like, I just want to like confirm one point which you said. You said write down what attachments we have. Like towards the end, you said this, and then like also the second part to that was like solid foundation of Krishna consciousness, right? Like
Solid
together.
foundation of security in our relationship with God,
Mm,
where we feel affection despite our disqualification.
mm, mm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on this topic? Anyone like to chime chime in?
Hare Krishna. I feel like sometimes our desire to, I mean, I guess I'm speaking for myself, but maybe other people can relate to the desire to enjoy in a certain way could be so strong, and when that happens, it's very difficult to tolerate anything.
Yes.
So the understanding that, I mean, I know it's a very high level to completely surrender to Krishna and this. I mean, actually, in one sense, in theory, we can understand that we are not dangerous. God is the ultimate. He's the center. He's the source of all sources, and everything revolves around him. But when that idea, that concept is not there, or at least the desire to accept that idea is not there, it's practically impossible to tolerate anything. I mean, even your own mind, in one sense. And sometimes it's actually easier to tolerate other people than your own mind. I mean, or vice versa, you know.
Mm.
So I feel like it's an important thing to understand. I mean, to cultivate that idea that because a lot of times, like the satisfaction from tolerance comes from that idea that I want something in a certain way that I want it, but I'm getting it in a way that's displeasing to me, and this is what creates a little bit of a suffering, right? But in
Yes.
re but in reality, what is it that I want? And I mean, what is my understanding of what is right or wrong? Who am I? You know, it has to do with the idea that I still believe that I want to enjoy this world. I want to be God in one sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for this humble soul that I was talking about, how they see provoking circumstances is, let's say there's something that would generally bring a lot of excitement to someone else. For them, if they receive this windfall of fortune, for them it's like, I don't deserve it, and this is simply an opportunity for me to serve better. So there's a lot of gratitude in the heart when there's a windfall of a circumstance. And in a contrary circumstance, when there's a lot of pain coming to such a person, the humility and the gratitude stay. And it's not just you're tolerating, like gritting your teeth and saying, "Oh, I just gotta, this too shall pass," right? That's a famous saying, "This too shall pass." It's not like that. For this humble person, the distressful situation is seen as, wow, it could have been so much worse. But because I am a recipient of kindness and grace of the Supreme, it has been reduced to what it is today. I was meant to get into an accident, rather, I just got my hand slapped. That's the beauty of a humble and grateful heart. When the heart becomes soft with humility and gratitude, tolerance comes with the territory.
So is tolerance dependent on every situation that's different? Because there are certain things that may be very severe, but certain things just a little mild. So you're able to tolerate some mild stuff that goes on, or as opposed to like if your house catches fire and you're left without a house. I mean, that's big, that's huge,
Extreme.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Extreme. So then the tolerance is it's just you're just unable to, manage all of it. It's a
That's right.
lot, right? So isn't it dependent also on the severity of situations?
Absolutely. And the severity of situation is not so much the objective view of the situation, rather it's related to our attachment. For example, if if my child who just started driving decides to smash my car into something, you know, to the degree that I'm attached to the car is to the degree I will get really upset or not. Same situation. If I'm attached to the car, I would be livid. If I'm not attached to the car, you know, young kids make mistakes. Just move on. Same situation. So my house burns down. Some people are like, oh, finally I can get a new house now. Or who knows what the situation might be. Thank God, I don't need to be part of this family anymore. There was enough fire in the house with just the relationships. Now physically the fire has burned down the house. Thank God. So it really depends on the attachment, not so much the what we might say, hey, it's objective.
So
Somebody
everything is
dies.
dependent on attachment. It doesn't matter what. Everything is dependent on attachment.
Our experience of the world is a reflection of our internal consciousness. And it's a very liberating thought because I have some control of my consciousness, but nothing on the outside.
Prabhu, how do you navigate being in environments where, there is an energy exchange continuously? So your fields are constantly clashing. Like, yes, our experience of the world is from within, but if someone seems like they have a very dark inner world, and that's like really hard to be around and move away from, if you're not able to physically change your environment, how do you navigate that?
Th- That's that's a more sort of like specific, circumstance specific um, guidance that might be required. But in general, some principles to consider is if you are unable to remove yourself from such a circumstance, to try your best to set boundaries, obviously, and also if you have enough internal strength to think of how can I be of service to this other person.
Hmm.
I was just in a work meeting, a work dinner. My boss completed 30 years of working at that company. I don't know who does that nowadays. And so I had to go to a steakhouse, and I'm the only vegetarian. Out of 12 people, I was the only vegetarian. And so here they are ordering steak up the wazoo, each one of them costing $120. And and my thoughts went to, okay, I'm here. What kind of conversations can I get into that would be uplifting, that can change the mood a little bit, right? I didn't do anything spectacular, frankly speaking. At the same time, I felt protected because of the thought of how can I be of service in this situation? It's not easy
Hmm.
for me to be around, people eating a bunch of steaks, knowing that some cow, poor cow, has died because of these guys' tongue, celebrating 30 years of God knows what. But, it's not a comfortable environment in one sense. But the mood of service can be protection.
Hmm.
Ideally, if there's some kind of toxic negativity in some person, you want to distance yourself if you don't have the ability to sort of work with that and serve them. And but always consider what can I do to uplift their consciousness.
Hmm.
Something may come, something may not come, but that's fine.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts on this topic of tolerance?
Just a quick clarification, bro, about the one point in the purport. It says one has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge. This particular statement, I mean, is Srila Prabhupada referring to the four regulative principles?
Yes.
Okay.
And just in general, prescribed rules and regulations like following four regulated principles, rising early, taking a bath, twice a day, just rules and regulations, living a clean life, regulated life. Following these kind of principles of religiosity help to cleanse the mind, bring more of goodness in one's life, and within a framework of goodness, now you can inject transcendental wisdom, and transcendental wisdom enters in to the heart when you have a framework of goodness.
Mm.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Vrinda, you want to pick the next person for text 15?
Yeah. Anama, do you want to go?
Is that me?
Yeah.
Okay. Text 15. O best among men, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. Anyone who is steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization can be equally tolerate the onslaughts of distress and happiness is certainly a person eligible for liberation. In the Varnashrama institution, the fourth stage of life, namely the renounced order, sannyas, is a painstaking situation. But one who is serious about making his life perfect surely adopts the sannyas order of life in spite of all difficulties. The difficulties usually arise from having to sever family relationships, to give up the connection of wife and children. But if anyone is able to tolerate such difficulties, surely his path to spiritual realization is complete. Similarly, in Arjuna's discharge of duties as a Shastriya, he is advised to persevere, even if it is difficult to fight with his family members or similarly beloved persons. Lord Chaitanya took sannyas at the age of 24, and his dependents, young wife, as well as old mother, had no one else to look after them. Yet for a higher cause he took sannyas and was steady in the discharge of higher duties. That is the way of achieving liberation from material bondage.
All right. Thanks. Any comments or thoughts on this verse, Prabhupada?
I think it's important to note, like this talks a lot about the sannyas order of life. And I go back to there was a comment in one of the purports, text 7, I think, in the material conception of life. Like it's important to make that distinction. So being overly affectionate for family in the material conception of life. Here it's talking about taking the sannyas order of life. But then it also brings it back to Arjuna. Arjuna was not, he was a Shastriya. He's not necessarily meant to take the sannyas order of life. It's just about following our duties.
Yeah.
So even when it's difficult, do your duties. Be equipoised, be steady. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes, yes. Vrinda?
I have another question about this verse. How do you know like how do you know what path you're supposed to take in life? Like for some people, like how do you know if this life of education and work and, having kids and going down this path is for you, or if you're supposed to, like how it says in here, you're supposed to be a sannyasa in your fourth stage of life. And
Yeah.
obviously not everyone can do that, but how do you know if
Mhm.
that's something what you're supposed to do?
So the general rule is that one should move through the four phases of life: brahmachari, student life, then married life, then retired life, vanaprastha, and then finally the sannyas stage. So without considering necessarily exceptions, you want to go down that path. Um, so, but more specifically, should I go down the path of simply living a renounced life versus living the American dream with a nice job, three-car garage, white picket fence, kids running around in the backyard, all of that, 401k, retirement house in Florida? To know whether I should go in either one of those paths, it's very important to have a teacher to help discover that, for one. So in the Bhagavatam, ninth chapter, the first canto, there's this phrase. Let me see if I can find it really quick. Yeah. Are you able to see this?
Yep.
So Bhishma Dev is speaking to Maharaj Yudhishthir. Bhishma Dev is on the bed of arrows. He's been shot down. But all the Pandavas at the end of the war come to Bhishma Dev as the great grandfather. And he is instructing the Pandavas after they shot him. So Bhishma Dev says, he first gives a whole bunch of spiritual education. He defines the classification of various castes and orders of life in terms of the individual qualifications. Then he systematically, in twofold divisions, described counteraction by detachment and interaction by attachment. Now, what the hell does that mean? Counteraction by detachment. That means countering material energy by living a detached life, like a renunciate, a sannyasi. Or interaction by attachment, meaning you live the life in attachment, where you pravriti marg, where you get married, have kids, have a job, all those wonderful and not so wonderful things, depends on your perspective. So he's making this statement that this interaction by attachment or counteraction by detachment, the fork in the road is right around, the 20 to 25-year-old age, where having a teacher to help direct where the student can go, has the eligibility to go, that determination is made. So he makes a comment here. Yeah. So in the Brahmachari ashram is a training ground for prospective candidates. In this ashram, it is instructed that the material world is not actually the home of the living being. The conditioned souls under material bondage are prisoners of matter, and therefore self-realization is the ultimate aim of life. The whole system is a means to detachment. One who fails to assimilate the spirit of detachment is allowed to enter into family life. That's the key point. So the teacher is looking for, is this person sufficiently detached? If not, the recommended path is enter into family life, but with attempting to have the same spirit of detachment.
Can I interrupt, Prabhu? How does, what does it mean to fail to assimilate the spirit of detachment?
During the brahmachari ashram, when you're a student, And during the student life, through spiritual training, if one learns to be detached and they have that innate sense of, look, I'm not interested in making money. I'm not interested in career development and making it big in this world. I'm interested in the ultimate goal. And it's very clear that they have that strongly for themselves. Then they are eligible for the path of full renunciation, no marriage.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Give you more to think about, yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a follow-up to what you just explained. So,
Yeah.
the second point which Bhishma Dev said, what he's trying to say is that you take up the family life and eventually move towards detachment.
Yes.
That was the second point, right?
Yes. Counteraction by attach. Oh, so interaction by attachment. So through attachment in family life,
Okay.
you learn detachment
No.
and
So,
you progressively move through the stages of family life to retired life to ultimately renounced life. Yes. It's safer for most people to take the family life path. And it's very intricate to learn how to be detached within family life. That's going to be one of our topics at the end of chapter 2, right? Healthy detachment. Somebody asked that we cover that topic. It's a very deep subject. How do you externally be attached? Because you can't be a family person unless you're attached with spouse and kids and family and parents and this and that. You can't do it right without attachment. But how do you be externally attached, yet you're growing an internal detachment? That is tricky. That is spirituality. In the quiet times of our inner life, we're spending time cultivating this detachment, understanding who we are, understanding deeply, not just theoretically, but from the heart, who our family members are, and relating with them from that standpoint.
mm,
Okay,
Anand Swami said a very nice saying about this. He said, detachment is attachment to Krishna.
yes, yes.
I
Detachment is
really like.
detachment is not I don't care. Detachment means attachment to Krishna. Yeah, Vrinda?
Sorry, last question about this. My one sort of point where I'm stuck on about this order of, you have your family life, you retire and whatever, then you reach sannyasi, is obviously not everyone, first off, lives that long. You can't anticipate saying that, okay, right now I'm in my family life, and then once I retire, I'll have time, and then I can, you know, follow that path. So I guess I just don't fully understand this concept, maybe of the different stages of life where right now you're in your family life, and then once you finish your job then you retire, and then after that you
Yes.
take up.
So, so even while in family life, you're cultivating detachment, right? Like I was just talking about. And in the Vedic system, at the age of 50, retirement happens. Then you move into retirement age at the age of 50 or close to it. Then it is recommended age of 75, 25. Each phase is about 25 years. Age of 75 is sannyas. That's a general guide. It's not for each individual that's appropriate. That's a very general guide. What each one of us may do depends on so many different circumstances. For example, if the Wi-Fi might have doesn't have anywhere to go, like no place to sort of receive care, then it may not be appropriate to leave one's wife and take up sannyas, right? That may not be appropriate, and the people that don't do that. So it's it should be very person specific how to apply the stages of life towards progressive detachment.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm personally, pushing against that age where it's going to transfer into retirement. I'm already planning it, by the way. I've got 9 years and I'm counting.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm not going to do 50. It's going to be more than that, but close enough. Yeah. Now, of course, that's my plan. And you know how to make God laugh? You tell him your plans. So I have my plan. Who knows what Krishna has in plan for me? Any other thoughts, reflections?
I think for me, I'm coming to terms with it's not so much about the external, how do things look, and have I followed it exactly to the letter of the law? Because I've spent my life trying to be perfect, quote unquote.
Hmm. That's exhausting.
Uh-huh. But how it's this concept of humility and the concept of a soft heart. How do you know when you've cultivated that internal world? How do you know when your heart is soft and you've developed that connection, and internally, even if externally you're still doing, to your point, caring for the spouse and not able to take sannyas order, but how do you know in your heart that you've reached that point, that you've got that relationship and cultivated it well?
Have you been hungry before?
Yep.
A silly rhetorical question.
Mm-hmm.
And do you need someone to tell you that you are full? Stop eating, you're full? No, it's a matter of the heart. So let me show you the verse that says exactly that, but you feel it internally. So this is 11th canto, text 2, so chapter 2, text 42, 11.2.42. So can you read it, Linnea?
Yes. Devotion, direct experience of the Supreme Lord, and detachment from other things. These three occur simultaneously for one who has taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in the same way that pleasure, nourishment, and relief from hunger come simultaneously and increasingly with each bite for a person engaged in eating.
Yeah. So you feel devotion. Devotion is the softening of the heart. You feel a direct experience of God and you feel detachment. You feel love, you feel Krishna's presence, and you feel detachment progressively as you take shelter of Krishna. And it's very similar to eating, where you feel pleasure in what you're eating, you feel nourished, your body gets strength, and you feel detachment from hunger. I don't need any more food. These three things happen simultaneously and increasingly, and you can tell for yourself.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah,
Sorry, I'm writing.
no problem. Okay. Anything else? Okay, if not, let's break out into breakout rooms and talk about takeaways from today's discussion. Welcome back. Okay, so now it's time for final reflections, final comments, something you heard someone else say that was meaningful.
Method. Brenda, did you want to ask your question and see if Prabhu gives a different answer?
Yeah,
Because he probably will.
this might be a long conversation question too. But so basically, Prabhu, the conversation that we had was about the verse 15 that we just read. And it was about how the text says if you want to live like a perfect life, you have to take up sannyasi, basically. And so my question was that no matter, I think for me, in my personal experience, no matter how much I try and you read about it and you want to implement it, I think just for me, I don't see how it's doable to let go of everything and truly be completely detached from everything, not being attached to your family, your thoughts, your work, whatever. And, you spend so much of your life, years of your life doing something with certain people. And how is it possible to truly be completely detached after doing this for so many years? And if you do follow this path, is there still hope, I guess? Not, maybe that's not the right word, but is there still a way to live the so-called perfect life of reaching liberation after you've been in this cycle for so many years of your life?
I think the the two questions was, and correct me if I'm wrong, one was the fact that if you sannyas seems way up there in terms of eligibility and capability for a poor tiny soul like myself, so attached and
Yes.
so easy to get attached. So, wow, is a standard so high? And then the second part of the question, okay, if I don't live that kind of life, if I live a quote unquote normal life, is it possible for me to attain perfection of life? Is that, did I
Yep,
capture
that's
it?
exactly. Sorry for throwing two questions at you, but yeah, that's exactly what I was asking.
Um, so I think the tension and the anxiety of where we are and what these texts say perfection looks like, the anxiety of seeing the gap between the two is natural, normal, and healthy. And the beauty of all of it, if you follow Bhakti Yoga, not any other yoga process, if you follow Bhakti Yoga, is you're not alone. Krishna is with you through that process. Tesham satatayuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti deva. Krishna says, for those who serve me with love, despite all their attachments, I personally, Krishna says, I personally take care of them. They're not alone. I give them the intelligence, the Dami Buddhi Yoga. I give them the intelligence by which they can progress towards me. And in the very next verse in the 10th chapter, he says that, and then in their hearts, I illuminate in their hearts, Jnana Deepena Bhas. I illuminate in their hearts transcendental knowledge by which all of their stuff gets resolved. So, my suggestion is to avoid considering the externals too much about what sannyas looks like. How the hell am I going to live in a forest anyway with tree bark on, as clothes and fruits and nuts and no hot water and no family around me? And I would not think of that external situation. That's like the bar I'm looking at. What I'd recommend to do is rather work on the heart. Let my heart become attached to Krishna. Tesham satatayu. That's always trying to please Krishna, moment to moment. And then let him guide me how to navigate this particular life, if and when I take sannyas or not take sannyas, which, by the way, it is not recommended that ladies take sannyas. Um, that's more for a male thing, but it's not the principle of sannyas stays even for ladies, meaning they, try to, as you go along in life, to become more detached. And the reason that the external form of sannyas is not recommended for souls and women bodies is because you can easily get taken advantage of in an alone, sort of unprotected environment. Don't do that. Rather, to still build up a spirit of detachment. Um, But again, the idea is to allow Krishna to help navigate what that external manifestation of sannyas looks like, all the while cultivating this internal love for God. Whatever I do, I take care of my spouse, I take care of my kids, I take care of my parents. Let me do it out of love for Krishna. That's the cultivation. And the rest just falls like dominoes.
Thank you, Prabhu. That was beautifully answered. I think exactly what I needed to hear.
And perfection of life is in loving Krishna. Perfection of life is not in becoming a sannyasi.
Okay. Thank you.
There's sannyasis that I've met that are certainly not perfect human beings. And there are lots of grahasthas I've met or householders I met that are very, very elevated and perfect in my opinion.
So the saying, do the do's and the don'ts will follow. I think Prabhupada used to say that a lot, correct?
I never heard him say that, but maybe.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
think I heard it in some other lecture that
Sure. I mean,
uh,
it makes sense to focus on the positive and focus on
yeah.
the general positive stuff. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Do you feel a little satisfied?
A lot. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
This
I think I was
sannyas topic,
overthinking a little
this
bit.
this sannyas topic triggered you a little bit. Yeah. Okay. But even if you take sannyas, we'll all join you in the forest together. We'll set up a hut, pull out some roots and fruits, and eat them together. We'll have a big
Great.
sannyas party. All right. Everyone, have a wonderful rest of your evening. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Take care.
Hare
We'll see you
Krishna,
next time.
everyone.
Krishna.
Hare
Um,
Krishna,